Sri Sachidananda Sadguru Sainath Maharaj Ki Jai. Ramana Maharshi, his life, chapter 16, the fatal illness. They take this body for Bhagavan and attribute suffering to him. What a pity. They are desperate that Bhagavan is going to leave them and go away. Where can he go and how? When in early 1949 Sri Ramana was diagnosed as having an incurable cancer, the long death struggle started, not for Sri Ramana but for the devotees, because the people who really suffered and struggled to maintain his body were his devotees, not he himself. Although there was pain, it was not his pain. The fear of death had left him completely with his experience of enlightenment in Madurai. The death of the body was for him nothing more than the laying down of a burden. For his devotees, however, the thought of losing their master was unbearable. They therefore did everything in their power to try and prolong his life. They begged him repeatedly to heal himself and for a long time refused to accept that his end was near. The conflicting emotions of hope and despair alternated within them until even the most reluctant was forced to accept that Ramana would soon die. In this tumult of emotions, he acted as a calming influence, repeatedly explaining to his devotees that they were the victims of a misconception, as he was not the body but the eternal and unchanging self. So, where could he go? What change could be there in his presence and under his guidance? Why this desperate struggle for the body, which was in any case destined to be relinquished at the allotted hour? The full understanding of this truth could only develop within them gradually. As the testimony to this, we have the deeply moving accounts of those disciples who were in close contact with him and who experienced firsthand the last months of his life, such as S.S. Cohen, Suri Nagamma, Major Chadwick, and Arthur Osborne, to name but a few. 4 operations. The first signs of Ramana's illness appeared in early 1949 when he would often rub his left elbow. An attendant who examined the spot found a boil in the size of a pea which rapidly grew and was soon as big as marble. Although it seemed to be harmless, it was nevertheless removed on 9th February by the ashram doctor, Dr. Shankar Rao, and the retired surgeon, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, without consulting any other doctors. The operation was performed in the bathroom before breakfast. Suri Nagamma reports that Sri Ramana would have preferred it if there had been no operation and the ulcer had been left as it was. He said, "It does not give me any pain. Let it be as it is. Why meddle with it?" When the doctor explained that the problem would be over if the growth was removed, he commented meaningfully, "Oh, will it be over?" After the operation, Ramana did his best to hide the wound with his towel. When people asked what he had on his arm, he joked, "I am wearing a bracelet," or "a lingam is born." The wound took about 10 days to heal. It was not long, however, before another larger and more painful growth appeared. Renowned doctors from Madras were consulted and they diagnosed it as a malignant tumor. At the beginning of April 1949, Sri Ramana was again operated upon, this time by Dr. Raghavachari from Madras in the dispensary. He cut more deeply than was done during the first operation. He cut more deeply than was done during the first operation. A detailed examination revealed that it was a sarcoma. The decision was taken to try radium treatment. This second wound had not had time to heal before a third growth appeared. Samuel S. Cohen was keeping a detailed diary at the time. S.S. Cohen's spiritual search brought him from Iraq to India. In 1936, he came to the Maharshi and built a hut at Palakotu. On 20th April, his entry was, "Sri Maharshi's health is causing grave anxiety to the 3 doctors who have been in constant attendance on him, as well as to the devotees." A lady devotee wept much and went to him in tears and asked him to give her his disease and be cured of it, saying, "Bhagavan, who are curing others must cure yourself and spare your life for us, your devotees." Once, twice, he waved off. and seeing her great concern, finally replied with great tenderness, "Why are you so much attached to this body? Let it go." Taken from Kohan Guru Ramana, page 108. People came to him repeatedly to request that he should heal himself. He used to console them with the answer, "Everything will come right in due course." He also liked to explain to his devotees through metaphor why the continuation of the body meant nothing to him. Thus, he used to say, when a man goes to the market with a basket and fills it with purchases and then carries it home on his head, does he not long to put down the load? And when we have finished a meal, do we keep the leaf plate on which we have eaten it? He also said, "You people talk of the tumor and name it as sarcoma cancer, but believe me when I tell you that, in my view, there is no tumor, no sarcoma cancer at all." On 1st May, Dr. Raghavachari declared that amputation of arm was unavoidable, but Ramana refused. "There is no need for the alarm. The body is itself a disease. Let it have its natural end. Why mutilate it? Simple dressing of the affected part is enough." This is the only instance when Ramana refused to accede to the wishes of the doctor. As a result, the arm was not amputated. The radiant treatment finally had to be abandoned as it was burning the skin and the wound frequently bled. As Ramana was becoming weaker, it was decided that a blood transfusion was necessary. The doctors also thought that it would be beneficial for his sick arm. So they would arrange a seat for Ramana outside behind the cowshed, remove the bandage there, and clean the wound. The affected part was then exposed to sun's rays for some time. On one occasion, devotees again expressed their worries and fears, but he merely joked about his bleeding ulcer. "See how nice it is! It is like a precious ruby. It has become an ornament to my arm. See how red it is! It is glowing brilliantly with the sun's rays falling on it. Look at it." The Ayurvedic healer who had successfully treated Ramana's broken collarbone tried a treatment using a poultice of healing green leaves. One evening, Ramana returned from his walk shivering with fever and walking with an extremely unsteady gait, was barely able to reach his couch. Shantamma, who could not control her grief at this sight, cried out, "Oh, your body!" But before she was able to complete the sentence, Maharshi interrupted her. "Oh, the body! What about it? What has happened? Shivering? What if it is shivering? What you want is that there should be life in this body. Life is in it. Are you satisfied?" Finally, he managed to control the shivering and looking at the people around him said, "This is Nataraja's dance. Daily it is a stationary darshan. Today it is Tandava Darshan, dancing darshan. Why should there be any worry on that account?" Then he kept silent. The suspicion was that the shivering was caused by an infection brought on by the green leaves, so this treatment was stopped. Sri Ramana found it increasingly difficult to climb the steps of the eastern entrance of the new hall. When it was suggested that he should use the northern entrance where the steps were not so high, he refused, as the northern part of hall was the women's area and he did not want to disturb them by entering there. But from now on, whenever he was not giving darshan, he remained in a small room on the eastern side of the new hall, which had its own bath. This room became known as the Nirvana room, as it was here that he died. Ramana continued with his daily routine for as long as possible. He would take his bath 1 hour before sunrise. Mornings and evenings he gave darshan at fixed times. He went through the ashram post and supervised the printing of ashram publications. He was extremely attentive to everything and everybody. The only thing he paid no attention to was his illness. Nevertheless, more and more restrictions became necessary. When one day the ashram management decided that Sri Ramana needed more rest and kept the doors closed for several hours, he rebelled against their wish, saying, "Many people come from great distances for darshan and cannot wait till evening. They must not be disappointed." On 7th August, the growth was removed for the third time by a well organized team of doctors under the guidance of the renowned South Indian surgeon Dr. Guruswami Mudaliar. All the instruments he needed for the operation had been brought from a clinic in Madras. There were about 30 doctors present. As the electric supply was unreliable, precautions were taken to avoid any power cuts during the operation. Large number of devotees were also present and after operation were also present after the operation. When Ramana learned that so many people were waiting outside, he insisted on giving darshan for them on the veranda of the dispensary. After the third operation, the wound was again treated with radium, and over the following months, a slight improvement was noticed, so that once again people began to hope. But by the end of November, the tumor had returned, this time higher up the arm. Day by day, Ramana's strength was gradually ebbing away and his rheumatism was worsening. More than 15 doctors came from Madras to decide if another operation was necessary, including Dr. Raghavachari, the district medical officer from Vellore, also had a look at the growth. The doctors once again decided that another operation was needed. Major Chadwick reports, the night before this operation took place, I went in to see Bhagavan and on my knees begged him not to have it. It was obvious that it could do no good. Each time the tumor had grown bigger and bigger, spreading up his arm to the armpit. I prayed that this extra suffering was useless and that he would let us be spared the strain, but he refused, for, as he said, the doctors had taken so much trouble, it would be a shame to disappoint them now. Taken from Sadhu Arunachala Reminiscences, page 78. The fourth operation was performed on 19th December. The doctors were in unanimous argument that if the tumor were to return after this operation, then they would be unable to do anything more for him, and most they could do would be to relieve his pain. After the operation, the maharshi was very weak and hardly be able to keep anything down. By now, the wound had spread so that it covered nearly the whole of his upper arm. T.S. Iyer, a homeopathic doctor famous throughout South India, was called in and started his treatment. The maharshi's condition improved for a while, and the devotees again started to hope. The darshan hours could be prolonged for 2 hours each morning and each mornings and evenings. Sri Ramana would move definitely into the small Nirvana room. Sri Ramana moved definitively into the small Nirvana room. Each morning and evening he could sit on the veranda of the tiny room for 1 hour to give darshan. As the Nirvana room is very narrow, devotees were no longer able to sit in his presence as they did previously. Various rumors circulated about the state of Ramana's health. A continuous stream of doctors visited the ashram. Several renowned astrologers came to read his horoscope. It was said that the Maharshi did not have long to live, days perhaps, weeks at the most. Large crowds of people came for his 70th birthday Jayanti celebrations on 5th January 1950. Sri Ramana stayed with them for several hours in the morning and evening. The final attempts of healing. In February, another very painful growth appeared and grew rapidly in size. The tumor had now reached the shoulder and had spread inward. Again, the doctors met to consult and this time decided there was no longer anything that could be done. Renowned Ayurvedic doctors and homeopathists now tried their methods of treatment. The famous Ayurvedic doctor, Dr. Moose, applied leeches, but in March he also gave up all hope. Other homeopathics tried their best with various diets, bandages, diathermic treatments, all to no avail. A blood test meanwhile revealed that Ramana was suffering from severe anemia. In the opinion of the doctors, the pain must have been unbearable, but he never complained. Although he sometimes remarked, "There is pain," he never said, "I am in pain." He used to make the anxious devotees laugh with his humorous remarks. His face retained his friendly smile and even became softer and kinder during the final months. Until the end, his eyes glowed with their usual luminous power. Rhoda McIver reports the following incident. Worried about Bhagavan's health, in his last days, devotees would send Bhagavan all kinds of medicines and these were carefully arranged in a cupboard. One day, he called for a big glass jar and ordered all the little bottles to be emptied into the jar and mixed well. He announced that he would take a spoonful every morning and evening. Some of the medicines were quite poisonous and we were scared. People send me these medicines out of their love for me. To please them, I must take them all, argued Bhagavan. A doctor came and he too was terrified. The mixture was fantastic. Allopathy, Ayurveda, homeopathy, herbs, biochemical sashes, powders, poisons, a lethal brew. Bhagavan was adamant. But when we invoked his own rule and demanded a spoonful for each of us, he relented and gave up the idea of drinking the stuff. Taken from Ganeshan Moments, page 74. Meanwhile, the Maharshi had become so famous in South India that his sickness was reported in the press on the radio. The Hindu, an English language Madras newspaper, as well as the Tamil press and radio stations from Madras and Bombay reported on his condition. As a result, more and more people flocked to the ashram. It is reported that on 20th March there were around 1,000 people at the ashram from all parts of India and from abroad. The treatment methods were also changed in accordance with the devotees' instructions. Sri Ramana let them do so, but when he was asked by a devotee what should be tried next, he answered, "Have I ever asked for any treatment? It is you who want this, and that is for me. So it is you who must decide. If I were asked, I should always say, as I have said from the beginning, that no treatment is necessary. Let things take their course." All manner of treatments, both sensible and ridiculous, were tried. He was spared nothing. There were often violent disputes amongst the devotees about the right kind of treatment, and a particular view would prevail for a while. When after some time its inefficacy became evident, it was abandoned and the next one was tried. In spite of all their efforts, the Maharshi's condition continued to deteriorate. He felt constantly sick and could barely eat or pass water. In the end, he could only take liquid food. The tumor had developed into a growth that looked like a cauliflower and was the size of a coconut. On 19th March, the Telugu New Year, Sri Ramana had a bad accident. When he entered his bathroom in the morning, he stumbled over the threshold and fell. A devotee wanted to help him up, but he refused and stood up by himself, albeit with difficulty. His kaupina and his towel were covered in blood. He probably had a fracture, but his attendant was not allowed to make it public. The part of his body on which he had fallen started to suppurate and was very painful, but this too was concealed. That day, Ramana sat as usual from 9 a.m. onwards on the veranda of the little room to give darshan. Soon afterwards, his health deteriorated to such a point that the darshan hours on the veranda could no longer be continued. He had to stay in the Nirvana room while the devotees formed a queue and passed by the open door. As the number of visitors increased, those devotees who had until then been in a close contact with him could no longer speak with him. So they had no alternative but to join the long queue for a short silent glance. The final days. In the final days of his life, in particular, Sri Ramana consoled his devotees repeatedly with the same words. They say I am dying, but I am not going away. Where could I go? I am here. According to the report by S.S. Cohen, on the 10th April, there were so many devotees that the darshan queues for both men and women had to be supervised by ashram volunteers. This darshan is no doubt a very great strain on the Maharshi, who, in his infinite compassion, keeps his face constantly turned towards the devotees the whole time the darshan lasts. His couch has east-west position, and the door through which he looks at the devotees faces south, so that for one full hour he keeps his head turned in that direction and strains his neck. In his present state of health, the strain on him must be great. Yet he refuses to stop the darshan or even reduce it to once a day. His nourishment consisted today of a little fruit juice, tomato juice, and some coconut water with glucose. Taken from Cohen, Guru Ramana, page 140. On 11th April, Sri Ramana's look at evening darshan was especially intense. Some devotees felt so moved but by this peculiar look of the grace that they interpreted it as his last. As they were proved right and they were proved right. Narayana Iyer wrote to Professor Narayana Iyer wrote to Professor Subbaramaya, Bhagavan's condition was considered very critical. No liquid food even, no motions, no urine, pulse very very feeble, blood pressure very low, heart weak, temperature 96.8 degrees, and frequent hiccups. Bhagavan asked in the evening if there was the queue in the morning. Sarvadhikari replied that it was suspended for some time. Bhagavan said that he would suspend taking even a drop of water till all that came had their darshan. So there was the queue last evening. Bhagavan sat steady as before, suspending hiccups, pains, and everything. After darshan, I learned that hiccups started. He is taking some food, that is a little buttermilk and fruit juice. No medicines. His general condition is growing weaker. Taken from Subbaramaya Reminiscences, page 217. After this darshan, the maharshi no longer had enough strength to look at his devotees. S.S. Cohen reports on 12th April. Today he stretched full length on the sofa with hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, pale, waxy skin, and drained of vitality. 3 attendants are massaging hard his legs. The upper half of the body is exceedingly sensitive and cannot be touched without causing him severe pain. During the half hour running darshan at 9 am, he could only at times turn his face to the devotees, but mostly he is listless. Doctors stopped testing and examining him and strictly forbade all access to his room. Taken from Cohen Guru Ramana, page 140. When on the morning of Thursday, 13th April, a doctor wanted to give him some medicine to relieve the congestion in his lungs, he told him that it would not be needed, as within 2 days everything would come right. 14th April 1950. On the night before the 14th April, Sri Ramana asked everyone to go to bed or to meditate and leave him alone. Even his attendants he sent away. The next morning he said in English to his attendant Rangaswamy, who had just finished massaging him, "Thanks." Rangaswamy, who knew no English, looked astonished. So Sri Ramana smiled and explained the meaning to him. The English have a word thanks, but we only say Sandosham, I am pleased. In the morning and afternoon, devotees passed by his open door in long queues. His tormented body was emaciated, his ribs were clearly visible, and his skin had darkened. What people saw was a deeply distressing vision of suffering. At midday, when some liquid food was brought to him, he asked how late it was, but then added that henceforth time would no longer matter. Until the last, Sri Ramana showed his concern for the animals. Some hours before his death, he asked if the peacocks, whom he had screeching, had had their food. The animals reacted to his approaching end. The peacocks walked round his room. The cows, dogs, monkeys, birds all showed their affection in their own way. But the white peacock stood on the roof of Nirvana room, screeching uninterruptedly. After the evening darshan, everyone realized that this had been the last one. The devotees stood in small groups outside, not leaving the small room where the master lay out of sight, and waited silently and in mourning for the end. Many eyes stared spellbound at the small window of the room in which he was dying. They could not see the Maharshi from here, but they would watch the movement of 2 large fans which were creating a slight breeze for him. As long as these fans continued to move, he was still alive. Inside the room, there were about a dozen people, doctors and assistants. Ramana's body was supported by large cushions so that he was almost sitting upright with his head leaning back and his mouth open. 2 attendants were fanning him steadily to try and help him to breathe freely, as he had now started to struggle for breath. At 7 pm, he was given oxygen for approximately 5 minutes, but as he felt that it brought no relief, he asked for it to stop. Then he asked his attendants to sit him upright. A group of sadhus and devotees who were sitting on the veranda of the temple of the mother opposite the small room started to sing Aksharamanammalai with the refrain Arunachala Shiva, and others joined in. When Sri Ramana heard the singing, he opened his bright clear eyes, smiled briefly with an expression of indescribable goodness, and tears of bliss rolled down his cheeks. At 8:47 p.m., without any struggle, his breathing stopped. There was no other sign of death, only that the next breath did not come. At the exact minute of his death, an object variously described as a shooting star or a meteor appeared on the horizon, moved slowly across the sky in the direction of Arunachala, and disappeared behind its peak. The French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, who had been staying at ashram for 2 weeks, rushed into the Nirvana room shortly after the moment of Maharshi's death and asked those present for the exact minute of his death. The famous photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, who took the last pictures of Sri Ramana, also photographed the funeral of Gandhi. His photos can be seen in copiously illustrated book in India. He later reported, I was in the open space in front of my house when my friends drew my attention to the sky, where I saw a vividly luminous shooting star with a luminous tail, unlike any shooting star I had before seen, coming from south, moving slowly across the sky and reaching the top of Arunachala, disappeared behind it. Because of its singularity, we all guessed its import and immediately looked at our watches. It was 8:47, and then raced to the ashram only to find that our premonition had been only too sadly true. The master had passed into Mahanirvana at that very minute. Taken from Kohan Guru Ramana, page 144. This unusual phenomenon was witnessed by a large number of people over a wide area. On 16th April, all English and Tamil newspapers published reports on the death of the Maharshi and also about the appearance of the shooting star. The funeral. Those devotees who had been waiting outside thronged towards the small room where the dead body lay. Many lost all self control. The police immediately closed off the area. Later, the corpse was placed in yoga posture in the middle of the big darshan hall so that everyone was able to pay their last respects to the Maharshi. The news spread rapidly to the town and the surrounding villages, causing thousands of people to flock to the ashram. S.S. Cohen reports about the following day. The singing and chanting of Vedas continued throughout, as did the queue of worshippers till 11:30 a.m. today. When the body was taken out to the south veranda for the puja and abhishekam, Sri Niranjanananda Swami Chinnaswami, the Sarvadhikari, assisted by his son Sri T.N. Venkataraman, poured over the sacred head dozens of pots of milk, curd, buttermilk, orange juice, mashed banana and jackfruits, coconut water, etc., followed by many bottles of rose water, attar, perfumes of all kinds, and sweet smelling oils. Then enormous garlands of fresh roses and jasmines were placed around the neck and strewn all over the body. Taken from Kohen Guru Ramana, page 144 ff. The place for the burial samadhi was dug out between the old hall and the northern wall of the temple of the mother. This spot had been agreed upon after a argument the previous night. The pit measured approximately 10.5 feet by 10.5 feet and was 7 feet deep. The stone masons isolated a small section in the middle with a wall. The rest was filled with several cartloads of sand from the sacred Ganges and the Narbada valleys. At 6:30 p.m., the corpse was carried to the Samadhi place in a decorated palanquin normally used for the temple goddess. It was placed in yoga posture in a bag made of finest khadar, homespun cotton cloth, which was then filled with pure camphor and lowered into the walled area. The pit was then filled to the edge with camphor and salt and sacred ashes to protect the sacred body from worms and rapid decomposition. Finally, the pit was bricked up, The crowd of people was so large that the 20 policemen were barely able to keep them under control. Cohen reports that about 40,000 people came during the day to pay their last respect to Sri Ramana, Jai Ramana, Jai Sai Master.